Okay, I was very excited to continue all night, and now it's morning, and I'm very excited to continue. Um, Hopefully this isn't too loud. I'm not going to talk very loud because I'm coming down with a sore throat, but I did turn up the volume of the microphone, and I still have the noise gate on, so hopefully this will be the best recording, even better than yesterday's, because the noise gate worked really well. Okay, I'm going to go back to thirdly, because we didn't get through that paragraph, and it was just awesome. Thirdly, the general frame of believers, notwithstanding the inhabitation of this law of sin, is here also expressed. They would do good. They, as in my translation says, they want, who wants to do good. This law is present. And I said the Greek, but I'll skip that. You got that last time. The habitual inclination of their will is unto good. The law in them is not a law unto them, as it is to unbelievers. They are not wholly obnoxious to its power, nor morally unto its commands. Grace has the sovereignty in their souls. This gives them a will toward good. They would do good, that is, always and constantly. 1 John 3:9 talks about poiein hamartian. Poiein hamartian, to commit sin, is to make a trade of sin, to make it a man's business to sin. And I got really excited yesterday when I was looking at that, because that's totally what I've preached before. 1 John 3, we've got, let's see, 1 John 3:9. No one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. And when it says cannot sin, it means the practice of sin, the business of sin is what he says here. So it is said, a believer doth commit sin. So it said, a believer doth commit sin, does commit sin, and so poiein ta kalon, to do that which is good. To will, to do so, is to have the habitual bent and inclination of the will set on that which is good, that is, morally and spiritually good, which is the proper subject treated of. That's what we're talking about. Whence is our third observation. So here's the theme of the third point. There is through grace kept up in believers a constant and ordinarily prevailing will of doing good, notwithstanding the power and efficacy of indwelling sin to the contrary. We have in us, because we're born again, because we're believers, our will is toward doing good, no matter what sin, what level of indwelling sin is in us. This, in their worst condition, distinguishes them from unbelievers in their best. Did you hear that? Let me repeat that. This, believers, in their worst condition, distinguishes believers from unbelievers in their best. The will in unbelievers is under the power of the law of sin. The opposition they make to sin, either in the root or branches of it, is from their light and their consciences. The will of sinning in them is never taken away. They will to sin. Unbelievers will to sin. Take away all other considerations and hindrances, whereof we shall treat afterward, and they would sin willingly always. It's only by the grace of God that unbelievers aren't all Jeffrey Dahmers, that unbelievers aren't all serial killers, or, just the most wretched. And that's why I've talked about hell being the place where God's restraining grace is not present. That's why hell's so bad. There is no restraining grace of God there. All good things are taken away. Only bad things remain. Okay. Their faint endeavors to answer their convictions are far from a will of doing that which is good. They will, so that they may, most of the time, he said earlier, yesterday, most of the time he said, unbelievers flow with the current of sin, so they don't notice it. Sometimes they will have a faint endeavor to answer their convictions. But that's far from a will of doing that which is good. They will plead indeed that they would leave their sins if they could, and they would fain do better than they do. But it is the working of their light and convictions, not any spiritual inclination of their wills, which they intend by that expression. For where there is a will for doing good, there is a choice of that which is good for its own excellency's sake, because it is desirable and suitable to the soul, and therefore to be preferred before that which is contrary. It's easier for a believer to fight against sin, because it is in the believer's soul a desire to please God just for the sake of doing good, not to gain anything, not to gain the upper hand in any situation, not to earn anything in God's eyes. We do good, we are inclined to do good because we have been regenerated and because we are aimed toward pleasing God, because we love Him. We're grateful for Him saving us. That's the sole motivation of a believer. He's saying here, if an unbeliever attempts to remedy his life from sin, from the life of sin, it is not out of love of God. He doesn't believe. It is solely for self, to serve self, to get some sort of advantage. Personal advantage. He's so totally just seeking improvement of self. Now, this is not in any unbelievers. Okay. Where there is a will of doing good, I'll go back. Where there's a will of doing good, there's a choice of that which is good for its own excellency's sake, because it is desirable and suitable to the soul, and therefore to be preferred before that which is contrary. Now, this is not in any unbelievers. They do not, they cannot so choose that which is spiritually good. I could have just read on instead of saying something. Nor is it so excellent or suitable unto any principle that is in them. Nor is it so excellent or suitable unto any principle that is in them. Only they have some desires to attain that end whereunto that which is good doth lead. They want the blessings of of salvation without being saved. They want the blessings of being a child of God. They want the benefits that come with being a child of God without being a child of God. The desires to attain that end whereunto that which is good doth lead, and to avoid that evil which the neglect of it tends unto. And these also are for the most part so weak and languid in many of them that they put them not upon any considerable endeavors. So even that desire is very weak. Witness that luxury, sloth, worldliness, and security that the generality of men are even drowned in. Look around now. Now we've got lots of luxuries for even the poorest of us. The monetarily poor even have great luxuries in this country, in America and Western Europe and all that. Luxury, sloth, worldliness, and security. It's eroding because we're not keeping it, but it's very great now that the generality of men are even drowned in. But in believers, there is a will of doing good, an habitual disposition and inclination in their wills unto that which is spiritually good. And where this is, it is accompanied with answerable effects. The will is the principle of our moral actions, and therefore unto the prevailing disposition thereof will the general course of our actings be suited. Good things will proceed from the good treasure of the heart. Nor can this disposition be evidenced to be in any but by its fruits. A will for doing good without doing good is but pretended. So what he's saying is, your will to do good will have an effect, will have a good effect. Good fruits come out of a good will, a will to do towards good. Fourthly, okay, here's the fourth point. There is yet another thing remaining in these words of the apostle, arising from that respect that the presence of sin has unto the time and season of duty. When I would do good, says he, evil is present with me. That the present, okay, so arising from the respect that the presence of sin has unto the time and season of duty, when I would do good, says he, evil is present with me. There are two things to be considered in the will of doing good that is in believers. 1, there is its habitual residence in them. They have always an habitual inclination of will toward that which is good. We talked about that in point 3. And this habitual preparation for good is always present with them, as the apostle expresses it, verse 18 of this chapter. Okay. 2, there are special times. Well, let me look at verse 18. Let's go back to Romans 7:18. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. Okay? Okay, the willing of good is present with him. Okay, 2, there are special times and seasons for the exercise of that principle. There is a when I would do good, a season wherein this or that good, this or that duty is to be performed and accomplished suitably toward the habitual preparation and inclination of the will. So, that word when. So, someone who has the will toward good is not constantly doing good. I mean, like every breath. Oh, look, the good's just flowing from that person. He still has indwelling sin, but there's the good. The good is coming out. Wow, that's amazing. Look at the good. It's like a fountain. He's saying, no, there are times when you're not doing good. But you're not doing evil either. It's just that there are fullness of time moments, so to speak, of when good is appropriate. So toward these two, there are two things in indwelling sin opposed. To the gracious principle residing in the will, inclining toward that which is spiritually good, it is opposed as it is a law. Okay? So we've talked about that. There's a law of sin that is indwelling in believers. That is a contrary principle, inclining unto evil with an aversation from that which is good, being averse toward that which is good. Now into the second, or the actual willing of this or that good in particular toward this, when I would do good, is opposed the presence of this law. Evil is present with me. And he put the Greek there. Amoi ta kakon paraketai. Evil is at hand and ready to oppose the actual accomplishment of the good aimed at. Whence, fourthly, the fourth theme of the fourth point, indwelling sin is effectually operative in rebelling and inclining to evil when the will of doing good is in a particular manner active and inclining toward obedience. So, I think what he's saying here is the good that we're inclined toward is not constant because we live a life. You know, we have to sleep. There are times when we have to eat. We have to read. There are times when we are serving ourselves towards a goal toward good. You don't want to sit and watch TV all day and watch the propaganda of Hollywood films all day. That wouldn't be toward good. But there are bursts of good that come out when you're actually going to do good. You're going to apply what you've learned toward helping others. And he says, in those periods, that's when the evil that is also there, but kind of lies dormant, is probably always nipping at your conscience to sin. But then, in these times when you are going to actually actively do good, that's when the indwelling sin really rises up and attempts to sabotage this good act that you are about to do. That's what I'm thinking I'm getting from this. Let's see what he says. And this is the description of him who is a believer and a sinner, as everyone who is the former is the latter also, just and sinner, as I think Luther said. Simultaneous justus and peccator, something like that. That's Latin. Oh, I know some Latin. I don't think I said it right, but it's still some Latin. Simultaneous, just, and sinner. These are the contrary principles and the contrary operations that are in him. The principles are a will of doing good on the one hand from grace, and a law of sin on the other. Their adverse actings and operations are insinuated in these expressions: when I would do good, evil is present with me. And these both are more fully expressed by the apostle in Galatians 5:17. Let's turn there. Galatians 5:17. I have, for the flesh sets its desire against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, for these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. He has, for the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary the one to the other, so that I cannot do the things that I would. And when it says, what was that? 17. So that you may not do the things that you please. Doesn't mean do anything you want. That's not talking about sin. That's talking about doing the good that you want to do, which is a mirror of Romans 7:21. So that you may not do the things you please. It's not saying you may, and it's not God talking to us, you may not do the things that you please. But as a believer, you are inclined to do good, and yet here is the war going on, and so that you are unable to do good. You are able to do good, but it's tainted. It does not come out exactly as you willed because of the indwelling sin. So every good work we do as a believer, so this is not toward justification at all, because that doesn't work. We know that from the Marrow of Modern Divinity, which you can check out below in my videos. We are not inclined. We will to do good, and everything we do is tainted. And we're willing to do good because of God, because just out of sheer doing what is right for love of God, to honor Him and to glorify Him. And yet the indwelling sin taints that good act. So, and here lie the springs of the whole course of our obedience. An acquaintance with these several principles and their actings is the principal part of our wisdom. They are upon the matter next to the free grace of God in our justification by the blood of Christ, the only things wherein the glory of God and our own souls are concerned. Did you hear that? They are upon the matter next to the free grace of God in our justification by the blood of Christ, the only things wherein the glory of God and our own souls are concerned. These are the springs of our holiness and our sins, of our joys and troubles, of our refreshments and sorrows. It is then all our concernments to be thoroughly acquainted with these things, who intend to walk with God and to glorify Him in this world. So this subject matter that Owen is attacking here, is tackling, let's say that, is of the utmost importance for believers, because we need to understand what's happening. Because we do grow to despair when we're just like, it doesn't work. It doesn't seem to work. I want to do good, and my sin keeps rising up. And I don't want it there. And hence we may see what wisdom is required in the guiding and management of our hearts and ways before God, where the subjects of a ruler are in feuds and oppositions against another. Unless great wisdom be used in the government of the whole, all things will quickly be ruinous in that state. So another reason he's writing this is because we need this. We need to be able to govern the warring wills in us. The indwelling sin and then our will to do good. They're fighting. And we need to understand what's going on. And we need to be able to govern what's going on. There are these contrary principles in the hearts of believers. And if they labor not to be spiritually wise, if we just let it go, how shall they be able to steer their course aright? Many men live in the dark to themselves all their days. Whatever else they know not themselves. This book is going to help us know ourselves. They know their outward estates, how rich they are, and the condition of their bodies as to health and sickness, they are careful to examine. But as to their inward man, and their principles as to God and eternity, they know little or nothing of themselves. Indeed, few labor to grow wise in this matter. Few study themselves as they ought, are acquainted with the evils of their own hearts as they ought, on which yet the whole course of their obedience, and consequently of their eternal condition, does depend. This therefore is our wisdom, and it is a needful wisdom, if we have any design to please God, or to avoid that which is a provocation to the eyes of his glory. This is a very important book to read. In other words, we shall find also in our inquiry hereunto what diligence and watchfulness is required toward a Christian conversation. There is a constant enemy unto it in every one's own heart. And what an enemy it is we shall afterward show, for this is our design, to discover him to the uttermost. In the meantime, we may well bewail the woeful sloth and negligence that is in the most, even in professors, that is in most people, even in believers, even in professors of faith. They live and walk as though they intended to go to heaven, hoodwinked and asleep, as though they had no enemy to deal withal. Their mistake, therefore, and folly will be fully laid open in our progress. That which I shall principally fix upon in reference toward our present design from this place of the apostle is that which was first laid down, namely, that there is an exceeding efficacy and power in the remainder of indwelling sin in believers, with a constant inclination and working towards evil. Boom. That's the theme of the whole book. That's what he wants us to remember. Keep that in mind as we read on. Awake, therefore, all of you, in whose hearts is anything of the ways of God. Your enemy is not only upon you, as on Samson of old, but is in you also. He is at work by all ways of force and craft, as we shall see. Would you not dishonor God and his gospel? Would you not scandalize the saints and ways of God? Would you not wound your consciences and endanger your souls? Would you not grieve the good and Holy Spirit of God, the author of all your comforts? Would you keep your garments undefiled and escape the woeful temptations and pollutions of the days wherein we live? Would you be preserved from the number of the apostates in these latter days? Awake, if you want all that, awake to the consideration of this cursed enemy, which is the spring of all these and innumerable other evils, as also of the ruin of all the souls that perish in this world. That's the end of chapter 1. And now I'm going to start chapter 2, because I've got some time. Why not? Let's just go on. Go on. Chapter 2 is going to have the following. Indwelling sin, a law. We talked about that already, but he's going to bring it up again because it's important. In what sense it is so called, what kind of law it is, an inward effective principle called a law, the power of sin thence evinced. So we're going to focus now more on the law part. And then chapter 3 is going to talk about the heart being the place where this sin dwells. Okay. Chapter 2. That which we have proposed unto consideration is the power and efficacy of indwelling sin. The ways whereby it may be evinced are many. There's many evidences. I shall begin with an appellation of it in the place before mentioned. An appeal. It is a law. I find a law, says the apostle. It is because of its power and efficacy that it is so called. So is also the principle of grace in believers, the law of the Spirit of life, as we observed before, Romans 8:2, which is the exceeding greatness of the power of God in them, Ephesians 1:19. Where there is a law, there is power. Let's look at Ephesians 1:19, because it's right there. And what is the surpassing greatness of his power toward us who believe? These are in accordance with the working of the strength of his might. Let me put it in context. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, so that you will know what is the hope of his calling, what are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and what is the surpassing greatness of his power toward us who believe. These are in accordance with the working of the strength of his might, which he brought about in Christ, when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the one to come. We shall therefore, back to Owen, show both what belongs unto it, as it is a law in general, and also what is peculiar or proper in it as being such a law as we have described. So we're going to investigate this law thing more deeply. There are in general two things attending every law as such. First, dominion, Romans 7:1. The law has dominion over a man while he lives. Do you not know, brethren, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law has jurisdiction over a person as long as he lives. Kurianis tu anthropou. It lordeth it over a man. Is literally the. It lordeth it over a man. Where any law takes place, kurene, it has dominion. It is properly the act of a superior, and it belongs to its nature to exact obedience by way of dominion. Now, there is a twofold dominion, and there is a twofold law. There is a moral, authoritative dominion over a man, and there is a real, effective dominion in a man. Okay, moral, authoritative dominion over a man, real, effective dominion in a man. The first is an affection of the law of God, the latter of the law of sin. The law of sin has not in itself a moral dominion. It has not a rightful dominion or authority over any man, but it has that which is equivalent unto it, whence it is said, basilenein, to reign as a king. That's right, basilenein, to reign as a king. To rule. That's an infinitive. Romans 6:12. Therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body, so that you obey its lusts. So, the law of sin in believers does not have that reigning power. And kurenein, to lord it or have dominion. Verse 14, as a law in general is said to have. Chapter 7:1, for sin shall not be master over you. That's 6:14. For sin shall not be master over you, for you are not under law, but under grace. And 7:1, do you not know that the law has jurisdiction over a person as long as he lives? Okay. So, he's distinguishing between the law of indwelling sin is not a king, is not a master, but the law toward of the Spirit of grace, that inclines us to do good, is our reigner, our king. Okay, but because it has lost its complete dominion in reference to believers, of whom alone we speak, I shall not insist upon it in this utmost extent of its power. But even in them it is a law still. The indwelling sin does not master them, but it's still there. Though not a law unto them, yet, as was said, it is a law in them. And though it have not a complete and, as it were, a rightful dominion over them, yet it will have a domination as to some things in them. It is still a law, and that in them, so that all its actings are the actings of a law. That is, it acts with power, though it have lost its complete power of ruling in them. Though it be weakened, yet its nature is not changed. It is a law still, and therefore powerful. And as its particular workings, which we shall afterward consider, are the ground of this appellation, so the term itself teaches us in general what we are to expect from it, and what endeavors it will use for dominion, to which it has been accustomed. Its nature is the same, even though it doesn't have dominion over us. Secondly, I need to start thinking about finishing up. Secondly, a law as a law has an efficacy to provoke those that are obnoxious toward it unto the things that it requires. I might have to start the next part with this one. A law as a law has an efficacy to provoke those that are obnoxious to it, unto the things that it requires. A law has rewards and punishments accompanying of it. These secretly prevail on them to whom they are proposed, though the things commanded be not much desirable. And generally all laws have their efficacy on the minds of men. From the rewards and punishments that are that are annexed unto them. Nor is it, okay, you know what? Let's start with that next time. So the second point about a law is where we'll start. I am finished for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you continue listening to future parts.